2 inches beginner level monarch arts, azure dragon surmounting 8 desolations. Xiao Yan's body was like a dragon, and the origin chi around his body was whistling. Like an azure dragon tearing through space, he landed steadily on the ground. When he felt this powerful force, he couldn't help but let out a soft cry. Beginner level monarch arts. Hearing this, the Xiaoao's eyes were filled with surprise. It leapt forward and grabbed Xiao Yan's shoulder. Its tender face was filled with joy, even more so than Xiao Yan. This means that if I can master the 4th style of the Azure Dragon Arts, I might be able to reach the level of the Holy Arts. Looking at Xiao Yan with excitement, the Xiaoao's voice trembled slightly. Even experts like Qi Yun and Grandma Bai had yet to master even a single type of the Holy Arts. If Xiao Yan could learn the 4th style of the Azure Dragon Arts, with his current strength, he would definitely have the ability to do so. He would be able to fight a monarch cultivation. The power of the Holy Arts shook the heavens and earth. The Holy Arts. It's possible, but the only thing I'm worried about right now is that I don't have enough origin cheese. Touching the Xiaoao's big head lovingly, the smile on Xiao Yan's face quickly disappeared, and was replaced by a layer of worry. Unlike the heavenly monarch fire-burning body, the Azure Dragon Arts was an attack-type monarch skill, and the amount of origin cheese needed to use it was immeasurable. Xiao Yan didn't know how many times he could use this amount of origin cheese. 1,000 leaves ancient monarch fire. Xiao Yan muttered to himself. His heart skipped a beat as he thought of this monarch flame. He had absorbed refining monarch High Tianyan's 2 types of flames. If he had the chance to absorb the remaining 2 types of flames, he would be able to advance by leaps and bounds, whether it was the burning spell or his strength. Yes. I just need to absorb a few more Azure Dragon Arts. The Xiaoao came down from Xiao Yan's body and said without a care in the world. Absorb more. Do you really think monarch flames are cabbages? There are all of them there. Xiao Yan smiled helplessly and immediately felt relieved. At least he still had news about the monarch flames here. It was much better than being discredited. Xuan and Kai Lin have not received any news. It seems like they are safe and sound. Xiao Yan turned his head and looked around. His heart was strangely calm. This kind of feeling was something he hadn't had for a long time. All right, what's the next move? A heroic spirit rose from his chest. Xiao Yan looked at the Xiaoao with a slightly excited expression. He would master all 4 forms of the Azure Dragon Arts here. Azure Dragon descends from the sky. The Xiaoao grinned and said in a clear voice. While Xiao Yan and the others were cultivating an illusory spirit space, the rebuilding work of Yunluo Academy had come to an end. Under the joint efforts of many students, in just a month and a half, the outer court stood up once again. Compared to before, it was even more prosperous, with numerous martial training halls standing tall. Clear spring water, 9 melodies cloister. One majestic mountain forest after another stood in all 4 directions, causing everyone's eyes to light up. During this 1.5 months' time, amongst the many outer court students that had been living in the inner court. Surprisingly, there were many people whose strength soared. This also caused many outer academy and inner academy elders to begin pondering about the relationship between the 2 academies. Finally, after consulting with Elder Xiao and the first elder, the division of the inner court and outer court was completely banned. Although various problems had appeared, in the end, it was still a huge advantage for them to increase the strength of the students in the academy. Heaven Pillar Peak under Qi Yun's request, Profound Emperor and Heaven Surmounting Monarch also fulfilled their promise. Emerged from Profound Emperor's hands one after another. As a holy beast, the dark Profound Dragon Snake's entire body was filled with treasures. Even a flying sword refined from dragon scales was far superior to a spirit weapon of the same level. Moreover, with Profound Emperor personally refining it, the latter was a Grandmaster Artificer who was famous in the Starfield. Even a true monarch cultivation sovereign might not necessarily succeed in asking for it in a low voice. And now, under Heaven Surmounting Monarch's persuasion, the former withdrew his anger. He focused on refining Yunluo academies one by one for the Yunluo Academy. Sir, when we were fighting Yuve Mu, there was a disciple of the Yunluo who had extraordinary talent. He retreated after exchanging a few rounds with Yuve Mu, and even severely injured Yuve Mu. He might be recovering from his injuries now. After he recovers, I hope that Sir will not hesitate to give him some pointers. While Profound Emperor was busy refining Yunluo academies for the Yunluo Academy, Qi Yun came close to Heaven Surmounting Monarch's ear and said respectfully, "Can he seriously injure Yuv Mu? This kid is really extraordinary." Upon hearing this, Heaven Surmounting Monarch narrowed his eyes and smiled as he nodded his head. "Fine, since Profound Emperor has put in so much effort, I can't just sit around and do nothing. Let him come after he recovers from his injuries." "Thank you." Qi Yun was delighted. Heaven Surmounting Monarch was a peak monarch cultivation, and his strength was far beyond his. He was also one of the successors who secretly protected the capital of chaos. Naturally, his means were mysterious and unpredictable. If Xiao Yan could learn a few moves from him, not only would it be helpful to his own strength, it would also be a good thing for the Yunluo Academy. Looking at Qi Yun's back, Heaven Surmounting Monarch sat on the stone chair. His turbid old eyes were sparkling with a bright light. Could it be the arts of synchronization that could seriously injure the Soul Demon's 9th disciple? Tisk, tisk, tisk. The Star Lord has really put in a lot of effort. I just don't know if this kid has obtained the complete arts of synchronization or not. Heaven Surmounting Monarch's voice became softer and softer until it finally became inaudible. Only the former's eyes became brighter and brighter, causing people to look at him in surprise. In Star-Severing Mountain Range, the wind and sand were howling as usual, bringing along violent sand that hurt one's skin as it swept over from the horizon. Fortunately, there were countless hills blocking it, so it was not enough to form tornadoes and sand. Star-Severing Canyon, the center of the abyss. This place was once the most dangerous place where countless powers' expressions had changed. There was an endless black fog in the abyss. Anyone who entered it, regardless of their strength. There was no sound at all, as if they had been swallowed by the black fog. The sect that had used the entire strength of the sect to enter the abyss was the one that had given everyone the most unforgettable warning. At this moment, endless black fog filled the abyss, accompanied by the rumbles of chains that shook the heavens and the earth. It was as if a peerless monster had been imprisoned, and the voice that came out seemed to have come from the 9 underworlds, causing one's heart to shiver. "Respected king, this is the place." Yin Juxuan, who was wearing a black robe, knelt behind a young child. His respectful tone was filled with incomparable fanaticism. The king of their Soul Demon clan had finally returned. Although the young child looked young and tender, there was a cold and ancient look in his eyes. He ignored Yin Juxuan's respectful words and walked forward. He stood above the abyss and looked down coldly. Suddenly, he said in a clear voice, "Tai Chi, do you still recognize me?" "Hualala." As soon as he finished speaking, the loud sound of the chains suddenly came from below, as if it was going to break the blue sky. In the next moment, countless rays of light suddenly shot out from the black fog. The rays of light transformed into numerous giant monoliths. The huge monoliths were engraved with strange-looking ancient characters. The characters reflected the radiance of the stars as they rushed towards the child. As soon as the radiance was released, the sky changed color, as if it was going to split open. "Star Sky Tablet, you think too highly of yourself. If you were at your peak, perhaps I would still be slightly afraid. Now, a fragment of you is like killing me?" The child smiled in a strange manner, and a disdainful look appeared in his eyes. In the next moment, black chi madly suffused his body. Countless chains shot out from within his body, and they actually shattered all of the enormous monoliths. After which, all of the chains surged explosively towards the black fog below. Following the furious cry of the child, the black chains cracked inch by inch. At the same time, a crystal the size of an ordinary person's arm flew out from below, and it directly flew towards the child. A trace of a cold expression flashed within the child's eyes, and then he suddenly withdrew his fingers. A gale of wind blasted out, and it smashed towards the child. It was unknown where the crystal had blasted towards. It had completely disappeared. Oh, that's the weapon spirit of the Star Sky Tablet. Why did I have to throw it away? I have to tear it apart and pay back the pain of being suppressed for 1,000,000 years. A wave of ghostly wails and howls came from below. The roars were filled with anger, causing one's eardrums to hurt. Don't be silly, the people of heaven are doing everything they can to find these things. Take him, if you are infected by karma, the first one to die will still be you. The child sneered and crossed his arms before his chest. Come out, Taiki, follow me to create a new era. Quote, 2 Rumble. The black fog in the abyss crazily filled the air, giving off a pungent smell that made people suffocate. Countless ear-piercing sounds came from below, and along with the shaking of the chains, the black fog became more and more solid, like a demon god that had crawled out from the depths of hell. Kai! Two bloody lights shot out from the black fog as if they were going to pierce through the sky. When the child saw this, his expression immediately changed and he instantly stretched out his little hand. He formed numerous strange seals, and they completely annihilated the two rays of bloody light. Are you stupid from being suppressed? Do you really think that the heavens won't make a move against you? The child's face was cold as he looked down, and his tone was filled with coldness. Don't shout and shout. It's the heavens doing that I have fallen to this state. The gloomy voice in the abyss roared. Soon, the bloody eyes that looked like two giant mountains suddenly opened in the black fog. It made people's blood boil, and it seemed as if all the blood in their bodies was going to break out of their bodies. Swish, swish, swish. The endless black fog spread, and gradually solidified under Yin Juxuan's burning gaze. For the sake of a muscular man covered in black armor, the muscular man was 1,000 feet tall. He had a head of bloody hair that looked like a waterfall of blood, and his blood was flowing endlessly within it. Yuv Mu, you want me to follow you? Don't you think that's a little arrogant? Are you going to betray Lord Emperor Kun? The burly man rose from the deep abyss and lowered his head. His blood-red eyes were staring at the ant-like child. His eyes were flickering with a frightening blood-red light. What I mean is that the Emperor Kun has yet to be born. During this period of time, you must listen to me. The child coldly snorted when he heard this. He did not have the slightest fear when facing this enormous creature in front of him. He. The robust man laughed coldly as he looked at his surroundings. His voice was as loud as thunder. Fine, since you've saved me, I'll listen to you. As soon as he finished speaking, the muscular man looked up into the sky. A strong killing intent flashed across his bloody eyes. That was the place where he had been suppressed for millions of years. Sooner or later, blood would flow like a river there. We can't stay in Capital of Chaos any longer. We need to go somewhere else and develop in secret. Then, we can find out more about the others. The child furrowed his brows and changed the topic to the main topic. Only the two of us have awakened from the 9 disciples? I didn't expect it to be so miserable. Tai Chi grinned, then looked at the child and said, Where are you going? You have the final say. Battle Domain, that's the place where the seal was broken. A trace of fierce killing intent flashed across the child's eyes as he spoke coldly. Crack. It has been so many years since we last saw each other. Tai Chi grinned, revealing his white teeth that flashed with a cold light. I still have something to do before I leave. The child was expressionless as he looked at Yin Juxuan, who was kneeling respectfully in the distance. He suddenly let out a loud cry, and the black chi within his body continued to spread. The child had a ferocious expression on his face, and there was no trace of blood on his face. It was as if he had exhausted a large amount of his origin. Soon, the majestic black chi transformed into nearly 10 black-robed people around his body. They were exactly the same as the soul demon that Xiao Yan had seen before. I will give you the name Yu. These 10 soul demons are your subordinates. Bring them and help my soul demon clan expand our territory here. The child's face was pale as he looked at Yin Juxuan with a cold gaze. Demon slaves will obey the king's decree. Yin Juxuan, who was given the name Yu, had a wild joy on his face as he kept kowtowing to the child. Let's go. The child sat on Tai Chi's shoulder, his face full of fatigue. Ha 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 ha. Tai Chi's blood-red eyes overflowed with cold light, and his enormous body was as swift as lightning as it instantly vanished from this place. Kekekeke. You slowly got up and looked at the 10 respectful soul demons in front of him. The smile on his face became even more ferocious. The revival of the soul demon would start from star-severing mountain range. When Xiao Yan was cultivating in the illusory spirit space without knowing the sun and the moon, heaven-surmounting monarch didn't stay idle either. When he couldn't get any news about Xiao Yan, he appeared alone in the capital of chaos. A calm voice resounded in everyone's ears, but no one said anything about the soul demon. Black Nether Emperor had been possessed by a mysterious expert, and the latter had already been killed by them. In any case, everyone who had been watching on that day had fled. No outsider knew that Yuv Mu had left unharmed. After that, heaven-surmounting monarch used his thunderous means to eliminate all those who were related to Yuv Mu. With the death of the leaders of the top 10 gangs, only Yu Mei managed to escape. Heaven-surmounting monarch only asked her about it for a moment. After seeing that she had completely escaped Yu Mu's control, he let her go. After that, he secretly ordered people to place all the treasures of the dark underworld in various places in Capital of Chaos, and spread the news. In an instant, it attracted the attention of all the sect members. Everyone had ulterior motives. The operation to seize the treasures of the Dark Nether had begun. Capital of Chaos. Once again, it fell into chaos. This had also temporarily attracted everyone's attention. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Heaven-surmounting monarch had eliminated all the spies that Yu Mu had deployed. Although the Dark World had completely declined, with the life force of Capital of Chaos, a powerful group that was comparable to the Dark World would be born once again. While everyone was busy searching for the treasures of the Dark World, the top 10 members of the group had died because of the death of their respective leaders. Many of the higher-ups had started to fight for the position of the leader. For a moment, an endless storm of blood swept across the entire Capital of Chaos. The number of people who had died was uncountable. Heaven-surmounting monarch was naturally happy to see that there was no external interference. The word, chaos, was the true nature of the Capital of Chaos. During this period of time, Profound Emperor had also refined nearly 30 Yunluo academies for the Yunluo Academy. Every single one of them was a treasure that could cause people to fight over it. These spirit weapons were not only refined by the body of the Holy Beast, they were also infused with the Monarch Cultivation Sovereigns of the Monarch Cultivation Sovereign. The power that they carried was naturally not something that an ordinary spirit weapon could compare with. Do you feel anything unusual? Heaven-surmounting monarch stood at the top of the Heaven Pillar Peak with a slight frown. He had been feeling somewhat uneasy since a few days ago. What did you feel? The Great Elder slowly stepped forward. His strength was much stronger than Heaven-surmounting monarch's. He had reached the Heavenly Sovereign, but in terms of sensing, he still couldn't compare to Heaven-surmounting monarch. I have been feeling restless these past few days. Something big must have happened. Heaven-surmounting monarch placed his hands behind his back, and his green robe fluttered in the wind. His thin and weak body looked like a sage-like old man, as if he was about to step into the sky. Don't worry, if something really happens in the star domain, there will definitely be movement from the heavens. Even if those law enforcers don't care, those old servants of the Star Lord will also take action, especially that Ling Jiyu, who has the heavenly god eye that can see through the 9 heavens and 10 earths. The Great Elder seemed to know the heavens very well, and said with a faint smile. I hope so. Heaven-surmounting monarch nodded his head gently and said nothing more. After a long time, he spoke again. Is there really no way to kill the cancer of the soul demon? Whether it's the Star Lord himself or the Star Sky Tablet, strength is a result of skill and fortune. They can only sacrifice themselves to suppress the 9 disciples. How do you want to kill them? The Great Elder smiled, but his eyes revealed a trace of powerlessness. The 9 disciples had once again appeared in the world, but the domain lords of each domain had almost all died in the last great battle. What kind of power could stop the 9 disciples in today's great world? Don't think too much. The waters of the great world are very deep. Who knows, there might be a lord with unfathomable strength that will appear one day. Heaven-surmounting monarch saw through the Great Elder's thoughts. His calm eyes revealed a trace of inexplicable luster. He looked at the ground under his feet out of the corner of his eye and said no more. I hope so. However, I am also filled with anticipation for this life. When all the heroes of the world emerged, it was even more so when all the heroes of the world emerged. With the tyrannical king body. Such a supreme physique. If he's allowed to grow, even if he's able to defeat the domain lord with his bare hands, it wouldn't be impossible. The Great Elder's eyes were filled with a smile, as if he was looking forward to it. Dominating heavenly king body. Heaven-surmounting monarch's eyes also revealed a trace of seriousness. This physique could be considered one of the top physiques in the great world. In the future, his future achievements would be at least at the heavenly sovereign. Oh right, that's right. And this kid from the academy. The Great Elder slightly tilted his head and looked at the heavenly peak in the distance. It was precisely Wu Tan Peak. 2 inches Xiao Yan. Hearing this, heaven-surmounting monarch's eyes lit up. He pursed his lips and did not object. After all, he did not dare to comment on the person who was bestowed with the arts of synchronization by the Star Lord. This little guy has been missing for nearly 3 months. Why is there still no sign of him? When Xiao Yan was mentioned, the Great Elder frowned. It had been more than 3 months since he returned, but Xiao Yan had yet to appear. There's no hurry. After the battle with Yuve Mu, I think he must have gained a lot. If he can gain any insights from this battle, it will be 10 times, 100 times better than what we taught him. Heaven's surmounting monarch wasn't in a hurry. He smiled faintly with a calm expression. You have all worked hard these past few days. You have contributed a lot for the Yunluo Academy. That Qi Yun really dares to speak. The Great Elder cast his gaze at Heaven's surmounting monarch. Although his expression was calm, he was secretly delighted in his heart. The spirit weapon that Profound Emperor had refined was full of spiritual energy. To the Yunluo Academy, it was a rare treasure. Heaven's surmounting monarch had single-handedly stirred up a bloody storm in the capital of chaos, giving the students of the realm and valley an excellent opportunity to train. Elder Mo, you must be joking. Without your permission, would a Qi Yun dare to make a request to us? Heaven's surmounting monarch chuckled and glanced at the Great Elder. The Great Elder grinned upon hearing this. He didn't feel ashamed at all. You are also an old friend of mine. The Yunluo Academy has suffered a great calamity, and it has something to do with Capital of Chaos. Naturally, the two of us can't just sit back and watch. Don't take it to heart. Heaven's surmounting monarch smiled helplessly when he saw the Great Elder's complacency, but he still spoke in a soft voice. It can't be. It can't be. The Great Elder laughed loudly. Just as he was feeling happy, his brows suddenly twitched. Both of them looked in the direction of Wutan Peak almost at the same time. It was as if a flood dragon had suddenly appeared in their minds. The murderous aura it emitted caused the entire academy to tremble slightly. It's Xiao Yan? The Great Elder raised his brows and looked at Wu Tanfeng with a profound expression. This feeling was really frightening. Why did he suddenly release this aura? Just like the pressure of the dragon race? Heaven's surmounting monarch was also silent, but he was slightly shocked in his heart. The sharp aura instantly dissipated, as if nothing had happened. The entire academy once again regained its calm. Those inner court students and elders who had low strength did not even feel it. How is it? Is this child interested in teaching him? Recovering his thoughts, the Great Elder smiled and looked at Heaven's surmounting monarch. He has yet to break through to the Emperor cultivation, and he already possesses the Qi of a supreme being. Among all the young men I know, I'm afraid that only the young man from the Sang clan can surpass him. Heaven's surmounting monarch stood tall and straight like a willow that stood proudly at the peak of a mountain. Although he was weak, he still possessed a power that could destroy the heavens and earth. After listening to what Heaven's surmounting monarch said, he remained silent for a moment before commenting. Dominating Heavenly King Physique, the strongest combat physique throughout the ages, born for battle. In countless eras, there have only been a few that have appeared in a fleeting moment. The king physique that was luckily mastered isn't the one that dominates the current generation and suppresses the heavens. It's normal for Xiao Yan to be inferior to him. The Great Elder chuckled and spoke leisurely. Heaven's surmounting monarch nodded without saying anything. What the Great Elder said was true. The birth of the tyrannical Heavenly King Physique meant that he was destined to dominate this era. Under the brilliance of the tyrannical Heavenly King Physique, everyone had to temporarily avoid the edge of the light. If nothing unexpected happened, Sang Yu would certainly be the supreme genius that stood proudly in the present era, the supreme genius that stood at the top of the world. This little guy is a bit interesting. Elder Mo, please deal with him for a while. If you can cultivate someone who can fight the soul demon in the future, it will be an unexpected harvest. Heaven's surmounting monarch turned around and nodded at the Great Elder. This is naturally easy to say. As a student of Yunluo Academy, the Great Elder was naturally delighted that Xiao Yan was able to attract the attention of the strongest expert in Capital of Chaos. Immediately, he nodded his head repeatedly. It's still not enough. The second style of the Azure Dragon Arts has already reached the level of a high-grade Monarch Arts. Although the third style is far beyond the level of the Monarch Arts, it is still far from reaching the level of the Holy Arts. I never thought that it would be so difficult to cultivate. It has been so many days, but I have only made some progress. Xiao Yan sat on the stone bench powerlessly, looking at the beautiful scenery in front of him with mixed feelings. The first style of the Azure Dragon Arts, Azure Dragon, surrounded the 8 desolations. He had already reached a level of proficiency in it. The second style, Azure Dragon, descends from the sky, was also easily mastered. However, the third style, Azure Dragon Slaying the Firmament, had completely exceeded the scope of the monarch's skill. Even though he had been cultivating for nearly a month, he hadn't made much progress. Cultivating the Azure Dragon arts requires one to comprehend endless killing intent. You have been cultivating in the illusory spirit space all this time, so you still lack an essential understanding of the third style. The Xiao Ao had already noticed the drawbacks of Xiao Yan's cultivation, so it reminded him in a low voice. You are right, the killing intent. It seems like it's necessary to go to the capital of chaos again. It's best to experience a few life and death battles. Xiao Yan stood up with a loud voice. His eyes sparkled with a dazzling light. With his current strength, he could go to capital of chaos. There was no need for him to be afraid. Xiao Yan, come to the Heaven Pillar Peak at once. Suddenly, a voice that was as thin as a needle, condensed into a thread and entered Xiao Yan's ears, causing his body to tremble slightly. The voice of the Great Elder? Recovering from his shock, Xiao Yan pondered for a moment, then stood up and flew towards the Heaven Pillar Peak. After staying in the spatial zone below the Heaven Pillar Peak for a few days, he was quite familiar with the Great Elder's voice. He didn't know what was the purpose of this trip. He's here. At the top of the Heaven Pillar Peak, the Great Elder's eyes sparkled. He saw Xiao Yan, who was rushing towards them, and smiled at Heaven's surmounting monarch. Heaven's surmounting monarch's expression was calm, and he didn't say anything. Greetings, Great Elder, this is... Xiao Yan landed on the summit of Heaven Pillar Peak and cupped his fist respectfully towards the Great Elder. Then, he looked at the Great Elder. He looked at Heaven's surmounting monarch who was standing beside him. For a moment, he couldn't recall who this person was. Capital of Chaos, Heaven's surmounting monarch. The Great Elder's words were concise, and he didn't say anything excessive. Heaven's surmounting monarch. Xiao Yan couldn't help but be shocked when he heard this, and he was even more shocked in his heart. Although he had already guessed that the person who stood next to the Great Elder was definitely not an ordinary person, he still didn't expect that it would be such a giant. Xiao Yan greets Lord Heaven's surmounting monarch. Lord Heaven's surmounting monarch has a great reputation. I have long heard of Lord Heaven's surmounting monarch's name. Today, we are fortunate enough to meet again. Xiao Yan bowed slightly with a calm expression. Currently, he wasn't a new disciple who had just arrived at the Yunluo Academy. He had seen a lot of powerful people. Naturally, he wouldn't be frightened by Heaven's surmounting monarch's name. I heard from Qi Yun and the others that you have fought Yuve Mu and even severely injured him. With your ability, no wonder you have such a disposition. Heaven's surmounting monarch said with a straight face. Sir, you are being too serious. It was just a fluke. If Grandma Bai and Elder Su hadn't intervened, I wouldn't have been a match for Yuve Mu. Xiao Yan smiled lightly, and with just a few words, this matter was over. Although his ability isn't good, his courage is commendable. Heaven's surmounting monarch stroked his beard, and a smile appeared in his eyes. He had already guessed the reason why the arts of synchronization was given to this young man. This disposition of his was completely different from that of this young man in front of him. It was possessed by a young monarch emperor. On the contrary, the supreme chi that was leaking out from his bones was even stronger than his. He's a good seedling. Heaven's surmounting monarch nodded his head silently, his heart burning with passion. Xiao Yan, Heaven's surmounting monarch wants to give you some guidance. Do you have such intentions? The Great Elder who was standing at the side spoke. He looked at Xiao Yan with interest. He moved slightly forward and blocked Heaven's surmounting monarch's gaze, but he was still giving Xiao Yan a crazy look. Xiao Yan was slightly stunned, and his heart was instantly filled with joy. He gave the Great Elder a gentle glance. After that, he respectfully said to Heaven's surmounting monarch, I hope that Sir will not be stingy with your guidance. I do not deserve to be taught. I'm just giving you some guidance. Heaven's surmounting monarch naturally didn't see the Great Elder exhaling a sigh of relief after Xiao Yan agreed. He gently smiled, then stretched out his hand and said, I've been living in seclusion for a long time. This is the first time I've met you, and I don't have anything to show you. These few days, I've understood a lot about you. I'll give you this fist technique. As he spoke, a spiritual light flickered in his palm. An exquisitely decorated bamboo slip was thrown to Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan reached out his hand and caught it. His eyes swept across the few big words on the bamboo slip. He was stunned for a moment, and then a trace of joy emerged on his face. Heavenly Transformation Fist, one of the four quarters of the Lone Sky Fist. Quote, To be honest, to the current Xiao Yan, after he had mastered the Four-Spirit Emperor technique, he no longer had any interest in ordinary monarch arts or even the monarch arts. Especially after cultivating the Azure Dragon arts, he had the ability to fight a battle that was comparable to the holy arts. A single monarch arts wasn't as outstanding, even if the solitary Heaven's Fist was comparable to a high-grade monarch arts. The only thing that Xiao Yan valued was the first volume of the solitary Heaven Fist that Man Yun had given him back in Forest Domain, the insights he gained from advancing to the Heavenly Sovereign. This was something that not even the holy arts could compare with. Xiao Yan thanks sir for the gift. If there is a chance in the future, I will definitely repay you. Putting away the Sky Transformation Fist scroll, Xiao Yan slightly bowed to Heaven's surmounting monarch and said respectfully, You were able to master the Sky Spill Fist and the Heaven's Limit Fist. I think you should know a little about the connection between these fist techniques. Heaven's surmounting monarch gave Xiao Yan a deep look and then smiled. The evolution of the Sky Spill Fist and the Heaven's Top Fist, do you understand now? Evolved to the extreme, and integrated into the Heavenly Sovereign. Xiao Yan mumbled to himself. In an instant, as if he had thought of something, he said in a low voice. That last punch, could it be called the Heavenly Fist? That's right. Heaven's surmounting monarch nodded and smiled indifferently. How do you know so clearly? Could it be? Xiao Yan opened his mouth. Only now did he remember that Heaven's surmounting monarch's strength was only at the monarch cultivation. If it wasn't for this, his first impression would be that this old man was the one who created the silent Heavenly Fist, the Heavenly Sovereign. My master is a desolate Heavenly Sovereign, but he has passed away many years ago. Heaven's surmounting monarch's smile faded slightly as he spoke in a soft voice. Kid, you're being rude. Xiao Yan hurriedly cupped his fists, but he was shocked in his heart. How could there be such a coincidence? He had obtained a fist technique from a silent Heavenly Sovereign warrior, and now he had obtained a fist technique from the disciple of the latter. It was really hard to imagine. The great elder stood quietly at the side, not saying a word. He silently glanced at Heaven's surmounting monarch. A silent Heavenly Sovereign was one of the leaders behind the scenes in the capital of chaos. After the death of the silent Heavenly Sovereign, his subordinates, the Silent Sky Group, had fallen apart. The original number one group of people had been divided up by his subordinates. After that, they gradually disappeared and no longer existed. As a disciple of a silent Heavenly Sovereign, Heaven's surmounting monarch naturally abided by the rules passed down from the capital of chaos. He didn't make a move to maintain the stability of the Lone Silence Heavenly Sect until it completely disappeared. With the momentum of sweeping across the world, he immediately established the number one public in the capital of chaos. He had buried the people of the heavens to better maintain the chaos in the capital of chaos. However, he did not interfere in any of the matters in the sect. It doesn't matter. Those who don't know are innocent. Heaven's surmounting monarch waved his hand and smiled faintly. After a moment of silence, he suddenly said, What is your most powerful skill now? Xiao Yan was startled when he heard this. He only hesitated for a moment before he spoke respectfully. It is a skill that has barely surpassed a high-grade monarch arts. It's just as I expected. It's impossible to kill an emperor cultivation without a powerful ultimate skill. Rubbing his beard gently, Heaven's surmounting monarch suddenly looked at the great elder and said in a mocking tone, Elder Mo, don't be reluctant to part with a precious student like you. The great elder smiled out of curiosity. What do you mean? The dark world has fallen apart, and the treasures inside are scattered all over the place. The last style of the Silent Sky Fist, the Heavenly Fist, happens to be within it. Are you willing to make a trip there? Heaven's surmounting monarch laughed. He didn't look at the great elder. Instead, he asked Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan's heart trembled slightly. Without any time to think, he immediately said, Kid, I'm willing to go. Heaven's surmounting monarch, you have underestimated this guy. Killing an emperor cultivation is as easy as cutting melons and cutting vegetables. In the current capital of chaos, how many people can stop him? The great elder laughed without hesitation and said leisurely, It's great that you're willing to go. Let me tell you, the place where the Heavenly Fist is located is called the Chaos Blood Cliff. That place is where the Mercenary Alliance's headquarters is located. Besides, there's another treasure that appeared with the Heavenly Fist this time. It's called the Dragon Imprisoning Lock, and it's used to control the heavenly beast. Some of the weaker holy beasts have unimaginable benefits. Therefore, the people of Mercenary Alliance would do whatever it took to get him. It was said that Li Xianfeng would do anything to get him. But don't worry, Li Xianfeng's real body is in the headquarters of Mercenary Alliance. The one who was here was just a clone. But even if it's a clone, it has the strength of a monarch cultivation. Besides, I heard that you stole a realm traversal jade from the Mercenary Alliance. I'm afraid that this trip will be a disaster for us. Heaven's surmounting monarch had said so much for the first time in his life. Not only Xiao Yan, but also the great elder's facial expression turned ugly. Are you kidding me? How many emperor cultivation are there in Mercenary Alliance? Even if Li Xianfeng only has one monarch cultivation clone left, his concealing technique is superb and his assassination skill is superb. Even I don't want to provoke him. Xiao Yan's trip this time is no different than sending himself to his death. The great elder took a deep breath and couldn't help but say, "Look, the one who was relieved about him was you. The one who is worried about him now is you. Elder Mo, why are you still so impetuous?" Heaven's surmounting monarch and the great elder were considered old acquaintances. He shrugged his shoulders and said indifferently, Xiao Yan, tell me, is it worth it to die for a monarch arts? The great elder was at a loss for words. He looked at Xiao Yan with an angry expression. Damn it! Xiao Yan recovered from his shock. He furrowed his brows and said resolutely. There was no hesitation in his tone. You have guts. I can't remind you. If Li Xianfeng really attacked you, you won't be able to escape no matter what. He used the Tao of assassination to become a heavenly venerate. This clone, although he's only a monarch cultivation, he has the laws of a heavenly sovereign. Don't underestimate him. He smiled and instructed Xiao Yan. Heaven's surmounting monarch looked at the great elder beside him, smiled and stopped talking. Chaos Blood Cliff. I wonder when the heavenly fist will appear. Xiao Yan took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. It was a few emperor cultivation warriors who took these treasures away from the dark world and hid them there. We have to wait for the news to spread. In 5 days at most, the entire capital of Chaos will know about it. Among these treasures, besides the heavenly fist and the dragon imprisoning lock, there are also many high-grade monarch skill and monarch crystal. Therefore, it will attract a lot of people. Heaven's surmounting monarch thought for a moment and said in a flat tone. The corner of Xiao Yan's mouth twitched slightly. It seemed that the things they risked their lives to snatch were all games that these supreme experts thought of on a whim. I will leave tomorrow. After thinking for a while, Xiao Yan decided to rest for a day. In illusory spirit space, he would rest for a day. He tirelessly cultivated. After so many days, both his body and spirit had become tired to a certain extent. The enemies he faced in the capital of Chaos this time might be the strongest. He had to be fully prepared. As you wish. Heaven's surmounting monarch did not say much and just nodded his head. After cupping his fists at the great elder and Heaven's surmounting monarch, Xiao Yan left immediately. He had to make the best use of his time and seize every second to rest. You have promised to give him some guidance, but in the end, you actually asked him to go to such a dangerous place. The great elder sighed. He looked at Xiao Yan's departing figure and said helplessly, cultivating in a life and death battle is the best guidance. Heaven's surmounting monarch was concise and didn't say anything else. Hope is life, not death. The future best seedlings of my Yunluo can't lose their lives just like that. The great elder harumphed and muttered to himself. Currently, apart from Kei Yi and Zhu Jun, who had intercepted him, there were also a few elders who had reached the emperor cultivation in the Mercenary Alliance. Apart from them, there were also a large number of mercenaries. Their strengths were not uniform, but their overall strength was not inferior to any of the previous 3 people. Xiao Yan was naturally not afraid of these people. The only thing he was worried about was Li Xianfeng's monarch cultivation clone, just like what the great elder had said. The former was a heavenly sovereign assassin. Just imagine, a heavenly sovereign expert that appeared out of nowhere suddenly wanted to assassinate someone, even though that person was also a heavenly sovereign. Fear emerged in his heart, let alone Xiao Yan, who was only a monarch emperor warrior. Flying across the vast sea of trees, Xiao Yan's expression became serious. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to escape from Li Xianfeng's hands. In this way, he could only try his best to escape with the Heavenly Fist without being noticed by the latter, even though it was extremely difficult to achieve. Let's take it one step at a time. If it really doesn't work, I still have the Starlight Silence step. Even if I have to use my blood essence, I have to escape from that old man's hands. Xiao Yan gritted his teeth and said to himself in his heart. After obtaining the Heavenly Fist, Xiao Yan didn't attach too much importance to the Lone Sky Fist, which was a combination of 4 fists and the Monarch arts. However, the insights related to advancing to the Heavenly Sovereign were too tempting, even for the current Xiao Yan. He didn't dare to say that he would definitely advance to the Heavenly Sovereign in the future. After all, he had yet to cross the first threshold of life and death in the fighting monarch of Lower Realm. Swoosh! While Xiao Yan was thinking, he suddenly increased his speed, and like a shining star, he vanished into the vast sky in an instant. Chaos Blood Cliff, located in the southwest direction of Capital of Chaos. It was quite a distance away from the Yunluo Academy. Compared to other places, this place was a barren land. Large patches of yellow sand had corroded the forest. Not a single blade of grass could be found in a place that was tens of thousands of miles away. There were numerous bare mountain ranges rolling up and down. The Chaos Blood Cliff was the most prominent one among these mountain ranges. The Chaos Blood Cliff was thousands of meters tall, and the cliff face was scarlet red. Looking from afar, it was like an unmelting bloodstain. It was especially conspicuous in a mountain range covered in sand. As for this Chaos Blood Cliff, there were also countless legends circulating about it. The most convincing one was, in the ancient era, there were several Heavenly Sovereign experts that fought to the death in this place. Everyone was seriously injured, and blood flowed out from their wounds. The mountain range that was immersed in the mountain range couldn't withstand the Heavenly Sovereign experts' fresh blood, and all of them exploded. Only this part of the cliff survived. Since then, it was called the Chaos Blood Cliff. The red color on it was. After countless years, it did not dim at all. Instead, it became even darker. The Chaos Blood Cliff was called a cliff, but it was a huge mountain range that spanned across the desert. The Chaos Blood Cliff was merely one of the mountain peaks. As for the treasure that Heaven's surmounting monarch mentioned, no one knew where it would appear. The Mercenary Alliance's branch in the capital of Chaos was built less than 10,000 miles away from the Chaos Blood Cliff. The other branches were built in other cities in the capital of Chaos. With an ingenious terrain, this branch was connected to the other halls. If one side of the hall was in trouble, the other halls could provide support at any time. Xiao Yan had rushed all the way here. He had already sensed several auras rushing towards the Chaos Blood Cliff. He did not know how Heaven's surmounting monarch had spread the news throughout the entire capital of Chaos. During the journey, Xiao Yan thought about it again and again. He stayed in a city called Eternal Spirit City for a while and spent a lot of monarch crystals to buy a few human skin masks. Eternal Spirit City belonged to the Eternal Spirit Group, although it was just a small sect. However, the human skin mask made by the sect master was an extremely high-quality item in the entire capital of Chaos. There were also many people who were interested in it. After all, in such a chaotic place, the true purpose of the mask had been exposed. It would still cause quite a lot of trouble. Although the human skin mask didn't have any effect on those who were stronger than him, it was better than nothing. Xiao Yan wasn't like the Mercenary Alliance who found out about his arrival as soon as he arrived in Chaos Blood Cliff. One realm traversal jade was more than enough for them to fight him with their lives on the line. After a day and night of traveling, a red cliff finally appeared in Xiao Yan's sight. Surrounded by mountains, Chaos Blood Cliff was like a king. Looking at the vast desert below, Xiao Yan pondered for a moment before landing. Currently, he hadn't heard any news about the emergence of the treasure. If he rushed to the Chaos Blood Cliff now, he was afraid that he would attract the attention of many people and become the target of all. In this place, the fewer people who knew his whereabouts, the better. Silently landing in the desert, Xiao Yan suppressed his qi to the level of an ordinary 4 monarch emperor. He chose a young man with an ordinary appearance and put his face on. After all the preparations were done, he walked towards Chaos Blood Cliff, which was located in the mountain range in the distance. About a day later, Xiao Yan sensed something. More and more powerful qi were flying towards the Chaos Blood Cliff, and there was no lack of emperor cultivation warriors among them. At the same time, many people also noticed Xiao Yan, who was rushing in the desert. After noticing the latter's strength, some ordinary monarch emperor hesitated for a moment, but didn't attack. In the eyes of those emperor cultivation warriors, such strength was not worth mentioning. Without even looking at him, they turned around and left. Along the way, they didn't encounter any trouble. After keeping a low profile for 2 days, Xiao Yan finally could not resist attacking the 2 monarch emperor-level experts that passed by him. The 2 of them were easily knocked down by Xiao Yan without any resistance. From their mouths, Xiao Yan had obtained what he wanted to hear the most these few days. A treasure has appeared in Chaos Blood Cliff. After knocking the 2 of them unconscious, Xiao Yan no longer hesitated. He suddenly soared into the sky and rushed towards Chaos Blood Cliff, which was very close to him. He had walked for nearly 2 days, but he had only crossed 2 mountain ranges. Chaos Blood Cliff was clearly right in front of him, but he couldn't reach it after a long time. This was the so-called saying that a horse would die if it ran into a mountain. The treasure is at the bottom of the Chaos Blood Cliff? After landing on a mountain range far away, Xiao Yan fixed his eyes on it. The surrounding mountain range was filled with people, and most of them were hiding even further away. News had already spread in Capital of Chaos that there were more than half of the treasures of the Dark Nether. No matter who could obtain it, the sect that was established could quickly become one of the top 10 sects in the Capital of Chaos. This temptation was not to be trifled with. Looking at the Chaos Blood Cliff in the center, Xiao Yan stood there quietly. There was nothing unusual about this place. After looking at the Chaos Blood Cliff for a while, he then looked in another direction and quickly recognized a few familiar faces. This included the genius who had surrounded him and Mu Yuyang, Shui Gong. The latter was dressed in a red long robe. Compared to a few years ago, he was much more composed. There was a fierce killing intent on his cold face, and his chi fluctuated. He was far stronger than an ordinary monarch emperor. I wonder if the people from the Mercenary Alliance are there. Could it be that they want to fight with each other and reap the benefits? Xiao Yan remained silent. At the same time, he looked around vigilantly. There were a few monarch emperor waiting not far away from him. Once the treasure was revealed, a violent storm of blood would erupt in an instant. Those who could come here were mostly the famous experts of Capital of Chaos. There were also many senior experts who were not known by outsiders. None of them were simple masters. No one said anything about the long wait. At the same time, they were secretly observing the others. I wonder what method Heaven's surmounting monarch will use to make the treasure come into being. Xiao Yan stood there quietly, but his heart was moved. Crack! All of a sudden, the mountain range that everyone was standing on shook violently. After that, underneath the center of the Chaos Blood Cliff, the ground suddenly split open, and a few Emperor cultivation level heavenly beasts broke out from within. When he saw so many humans around him, his fury instantly soared to the sky. They roared and charged forward, and in an instant, a few monarch emperor warriors were torn apart. They had become the targets of these heavenly beasts' fury. The treasure has been born. In Yunluo Academy, Heaven's surmounting monarch, who had his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes and smiled. His smile was filled with pride. He was quite fond of such memes.